Today we are looking at the first principle. You use affirm the inherent worth and dignity of every person. These words, number 435 in the back of the hymn book, these were chosen by Glenda, our speaker. We come together this morning to remind one another to rest for a moment on the forming edge of our lives, to resist the headlong tumble into the next moment, until we claim for ourselves awareness and gratitude, taking the time to look into one another's faces and see their communion, the reflection of our own eyes. This house of laughter and silence, memory and hope, is hallowed by our presence together. The opening hymn, number 301. Transitional words are not traditional.
This is a song by Harry Chapin, a great folk singer who literally gave most of his money away and spent most, I think, well over half of his concerts were benefits for issues of hunger and other issues. Just a great human being. All the neighbors knew he really was a strange one, where the gossip kept on building to a buzz. Everybody knew he was different. No one knew what he was. Now they say he's supposed to be the son of the Lord, but he's keeping just as quiet as a mouse. He's been waiting for a call from the man upstairs, but he lives in a one-story house. It isn't easy growing up to be Jesus. All right. It isn't easy growing up to be Jesus, with no steady job and no steady job. You ain't got time to worry about those little things in life when you're supposed to be out saving the world. Now we all know adolescence is confusing, but tell me how confused can you get? He's been hanging around here for almost 30 years now, and he hasn't even really started yet. Oh, the questions kept on building in crescendo. They were asking him again and again. His father said, I can't understand him. And his mother simply said, Amen. It isn't easy growing up to be Jesus, with no steady job and no steady girl. You ain't got time to worry about those little things in life when you're supposed to be out saving the world. No, you ain't got time to worry about those little things in life when you're supposed to be out saving the world.
So I have the pleasure of introducing our speaker, Glenda Breeden. I am so happy that she was willing to do this sermon. She was supposed to do it back in December, and I've waited a long time to hear it. Life intervened, but she's with us today. So Glenda, welcome.
Okay, first I'm going to read the poem that inspired me to think about this stuff. It's by Brian Doyle. It's from his book, The Kind of Brave You Wanted to Be. A stigmata. My lovely bride shows me her palms yesterday, Holy Thursday. And indeed there are cuts on her palms, and she says cheerfully, these are paper cuts from work. But for an instant I wondered if I had a stigmata like Jesus, and I started giggling and couldn't hardly stop for a while. But then it hit me that the poor guy had the sharpest vision ever inflicted on a human being. What an awful, relentless load that must have been, you know, to see everything that would happen to you way into the future. That would be unmistakable hell. It would. You know what I mean? Maybe he was 7 years old when he had the first intimation, when he had a vision as clear as could be of Pilate and the olive wood cross, and Malchus's ear wet in the dust in the garden at night. Man, the poor kid, to not be astigmatic. You wish he had some days he forgot, maybe, or his buddies made him laugh so hard he could hardly stop. Some weeks when he was just a kid, a gawky, sneery teenager, a shy, calm young guy everyone called Yeshua as they ordered carpentered things from the shop. They tease him as they leave, and he is snickering as he fills out the work order. And then his future smashes in again on him. The poor guy. We wish he did have days when he didn't see too well. Am I right? How weird to say that. But if he was truly us, which I think is the genius of the whole thing, that he wasn't some superstar but an illuminated us, which means we're him and he's us somehow in a way that means he didn't die, that he's a verb, then you feel for him. A young guy, hardly older than the soldiers blown up every day in our wars. You wish he had a day sometimes when he didn't see well, when he couldn't focus, when he forgot. But if he was truly us, Brian Doyle is writing about Jesus here, of course, and about the awful trait of knowing and feeling the sadness of the world as is, which I think most of us can relate to, and the world to come. And if Jesus was truly us, I believe he also had moments of falling down laughter and nonstop giggling and joy too heavy to know how to put into words. He tried sometimes, I think, if the accounts in the Gospels are his true words, he tried to put into words some of his deepest joys and hopes and longings, some of his astute philosophy of life, with words such as, love your neighbor as yourself, do unto others, inasmuch as you do unto one of the least of these, etc., and the Beatitudes, you know, blessed are the meek, blessed are the peacemakers, blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, to name a few. It might just be a matter of semantics, but the word blessed makes me think that an outside entity with a capital E is doing the blessing. So that's not a good fit for me. Rather than blessed or blessed, I prefer happy or contented. So for the peacemakers, blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God. Besides tossing out sons for a more inclusive word, I might also borrow from another Bible verse, 1 John 4:8, where it says, God is love. Pretty straightforward. If God is love, then love is God, one and the same. So, to rephrase the blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God, I might say satisfied or happy are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of love. I like that. So back to Doyle's poem. Quote, and if Jesus was truly human, end quote, then one would hope, or I would hope, along with the preaching and teaching persona of the Sermon on the Mount, which spawned the Beatitudes, and along with the babe in a manger persona, the studious 12-year-old persona, and the champion of the down and out persona, one would hope that Jesus also giggled uncontrollably as an infant when his mama and papa played peekaboo with him, that he loved climbing trees and shooting the breeze with his buddies, and that he treasured sharing a glass of wine with Mary Magdalene. Maybe he picked flowers for his mother and played practical jokes on his brothers. Maybe he got into trouble every so often for failing to do his chores or swearing when he hit his thumb with a hammer. Maybe he didn't always succeed at doing the right thing, loving his neighbor as himself. Then again, maybe he was a sensitive kid that knew immediately when he'd hurt someone's feelings or had done something he shouldn't have and was quick to say, I'm sorry, I made a mistake. And maybe when someone wronged him, he was quick to forgive. I don't think he would like this 2,000-year-old pedestal where he sits, this model of perfection and piety that so many people are called upon to emulate. I think if given half a chance, a voice, these many centuries later, he'd laugh out loud, shake his head, and tell us some funny stories of blunders he made on his short sojourn on earth. Maybe he'd turn it into another parable or beatitude like, blessed are we when we can laugh at ourselves and reveal our imperfections to our neighbors, for we shall be accepted, warts and all. Or blessed are we when we fall flat on our faces, for we shall be closer to understanding what it means to be a human being. Or blessed are we when we can find beauty, maybe even humor, in other people's interpretations of the Scripture, whosever Scripture it might be, for we shall be enlightened. Which brings to mind one of my favorite retellings of the Christmas story, and since I didn't get to share it with you when I was scheduled to speak in December, I'll share it today, a Palm Sunday Christmas story. It was mid-December 2004, and our family, daughter Denise, her husband Sean, and grandson Glenn, and our son Dietrich, had come to our house for family dinner. Glenn was 3 at the time. He's 20 now. Been a while. Glenn was 3 at the time, and after dinner, he and I climbed the ladder to our loft looking for treasures. He wore a hat with a light attached and was shining it here and there, saying, "Where's the scene, Glenda? We need to find the scene." I was stumped. Didn't have a clue what he was looking for. There's a tall man with a broken foot, and there's a little baby that sleeps in a feed trough on top of some hay. The scene. Oh, yeah, the scene. The Nativity Scene. Shine the light back in that corner. See the sparkly garland? Those are Christmas decorations. The Nativity Scene will be in one of those sacks. We pulled the sacks closer to the ladder, and I handed each one down to Grandpa Bill. After Glenn and I climbed down, I pulled a cardboard box out of one of the sacks and handed it to him. He carried it to Denise. "This is the Nativity Scene, Mama. You want to help me unwrap it?" Denise said, "Oh, yes, Glenn. This has been one of my favorite things about Christmas for as long as I can remember. Uncle Dietrich and I were about your age when Mom brought these home from a big church conference." Denise and Glenn unwrapped each figure: shepherds, wise men, camels, an angel, the sheep, the manger, or the feed trough, as Glenn called it, and of course, Mary, Joseph, and the baby Jesus. Glenn unwrapped the baby very carefully and laid it in the manger. He and Denise moved the wooden figures around in different formations on the floor and leaned the broken-footed shepherd against the box. I was standing above, looking down. "Those camels are 3 different sizes," I declared. "I've never noticed that in more than 30 years. Look how much bigger that middle camel is than the other 2. Glenn inspected them carefully and declared the bigger one his, that he would take on long trips like the French Lick to see the steam engine. And he'd ride the biggest sheep to closer places like Blooming Foods and Grandpa Jack's. The nativity scene took on a new life as Glenn added other small figurines from around the house, a beaded turtle from Mexico, a ceramic bird, a wooden cat, an antique metal Santa, and he told how they'd all come to play with the baby so his mama and papa could get some rest. Yes, Denise applauded his idea. Most mamas and papas need extra need extra rest from time to time. But not for long, Glenn asserted, as he moved Mary and Joseph close to the manger again. Baby Jesus might cry if he wakes up and doesn't see his mom and papa. You know how babies are. I threw a red cloth over the end table, and Glenn arranged the figures on it, everyone lying down, even the camels and Santa. When his mama and papa told him it was time to go home for the night, he put his coat and hat on, then turned back to make one more adjustment. He laid the baby between Mary and Joseph and set the cat in the manger. She'll keep the manger warm till morning, Glenn said. That's a good job for a cat because she can sleep while she's working. His eyes traveled over the nativity scene one more time before he grabbed Sean's hand and headed out the door. You can wake them up in the morning, Grandma, and don't forget about the shepherd with the broken foot. He'll need some help. Every time I've set out our nativity scene for Christmas holiday season since then, I've added 2 or 3 non-traditional figures, even when Glenn was no longer interested in taking charge. This past Christmas, I added the miniature antique Santa, he seems to be a regular, and an onyx panther and turtle from Mayan artists that Bill and I met in Mexico on Isla Mujeres, and they're all gazing into the manger along with the usual suspects. The myth of the virgin birth and the truth of family stories and all creatures great and small intersect and bring me joy. This year I also included the friendship bracelet that Philip Stroud slipped off his wrist onto mine one day when I was visiting him in prison. I hung it on my grandma's ceramic Christmas tree, which sits on the same table as the nativity scene. Philip's symbolic presence also brings me joy, a personalized reimagining of the Christmas story. And so back again to Brian Doyle's poem, which speaks more to the Easter season than the Christmas season. Quote, maybe Jesus was 7 years old when he had the first intimation, when he had a vision clear as could be of Pilate and the olive wood cross and Malchus's ear wet in the dust in the garden at night. Man, the poor kid, to not be astigmatic, end quote. My friend Philip was sentenced to death when he was 21, not so much younger than Jesus when Jesus was sentenced to death. Philip's sentence was commuted to life without parole 3 years later. Jesus wasn't so lucky. Personally, I don't see Jesus as being hung on the cross, publicly humiliated and crucified as having anything to do with salvation. Rather, it was the state government at its worst at that point in history, using the death penalty to scare the masses into submission, to say you better think twice before riding into Jerusalem on a donkey with profundities falling from your lips that lift up the poor and criticize the rich, or to say you'd better not offer your heart and soul to the business of God, the business of love, unless you're willing to risk getting nailed to a cross. It is a prime example of political power versus people power. Jesus apparently understood the risk he was taking in speaking truth to power, but I don't think he had a vision as clear as could be when he took his traveling salvation show to Jerusalem. Parables and beatitudes that played well in the villages, the countryside, and down by the riverside didn't play so well at the seat of power. I think it was 1983 when our family of 4 and Bill's twin brother's family of 4, we lived together at that time off the grid on a farm in Greene County. The 8 of us traveled to Washington, D.C. to play our brand of peace and justice music in front of the White House and in the mall at the Pentagon. Our songs, which called for an end to war, peace on earth, goodwill to all, and bread not bombs, played well at peace rallies, nuclear freeze gatherings, and campfire circles in southern Indiana, here at Terre Haute a few times, and they played well at the Riverside Church in New York City at the 5th Annual Nuclear Disarmament Conference, just a couple days prior to our D.C. excursion. People clapped, sang along, even danced to our back porch folk country gospel style of music, but it didn't play so well in D.C. Picture the 8 of us standing in front of the White House with our guitars, upright bass, tambourine, and 4 stair-step kids from 8 to 11. Picture our counterculture persona, all of us with long hair and patched faded jeans. Picture the people passing by, some giving thumbs up, some shaking their heads in disgust, the government agents recognizable in their sunglasses and suits all standing around, blowing in the wind, down by the riverside, peace like a river. And then we hauled our family and our instruments into the mall at the Pentagon and played and sang our songs there. White men, rich men, dreaming up such evil weapons, chemical and nuclear weapons, from your ivory towers. There were shoppers who stopped to listen, some children especially, who danced along with our livelier tunes, leaning on America's nuclear arms. But mostly I remembered the half dozen or so men in black, sunglasses perched conspicuously on their noses, standing back a ways, but obviously surrounding us. We looked more than a little out of place among those cosmopolitan shoppers and government employees. We definitely attracted attention, and I think that was 90% of our reason for being there. Didn't really expect to start a revolution or shut down the mighty military-industrial complex. We wanted people to hear us, to think about our songs, to hunger and thirst after right living, right action, so they could be satisfied. Our audience didn't compare to the multitudes that Jesus attracted riding into Jerusalem on the back of a small donkey, and nobody waved palms at us or shouted, "Hosanna, Hosanna." And thank goodness we weren't arrested and carried before Ronald Reagan to determine our fates. We probably wouldn't make it across the street in D.C. these days, let alone into the Pentagon, carrying our possible instruments of mass destruction, looking like a family terrorist cell. Times have changed for sure. The CIA agents, or whoever they were, would definitely be touchier today about the hats we wore, the heavy upright bass, those feral-looking kids. If not a cross and nails through our hands and feet, we surely could expect a thorough questioning, confiscation of our belongings, perhaps confiscation of our kids, and maybe a prison sentence. We definitely wouldn't play well in Washington, D.C. these days. Jesus wouldn't either, I don't think. Even if he looked just like the paintings with his long hair and white robe and sandals, even if he held out his hands in clear sight, if he preached, "Give up your riches and feed the hungry, clothe the naked, heal the sick, open your doors to the refugees, and beat your swords into plowshares," he would be turned away from the gates of the city. Perhaps not crucified, but demonized by those who persistently call on evangelical Christians to secure their seats in Congress. Besides carrying the weight of his convictions, his commitment to love and justice on his shoulders as he rode into Jerusalem, I do hope Jesus enjoyed the parade, the hosannas, the cooling breezes of the palm leaves, the hustle and bustle of the big city. I can imagine him scratching the donkey between the ears and marveling at the softness of its fur, feeling a little ludicrous, feet hanging to the ground on such a small conveyance, smiling a little at the scene he and his followers created. I don't believe he knew what was to come, not totally. He probably knew there was risk involved, considering the climb of the Roman Empire at the time. He was a man from the small town of Nazareth, wanting to sing his songs of peace and protest at the Pentagon. Maybe he was smiling inwardly, thinking how Mary Magdalene would laugh when he described the scene to her, if she wasn't there with him, how his mother would chide him for his boldness, his foolhardy venture, seeing a future of retelling this scene to his dad and brothers and them shaking their heads at the dusty images it brought up. I don't think Jesus knew he'd be executed as a political troublemaker and enemy of the state. Who was he, after all, to cause the powers that be to tremble in their togas? Who was he to warrant such vicious retribution? I love it that even with the situation playing out on the hill of Golgotha, Jesus stayed true to his teachings. his teachings, I say unto you, forgive those who persecute you. When he prayed, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. I think about the federal executions that were happening in the summer, fall, and winter of 2020 and on into 2021, so very close to where we're meeting this morning. The 10 men and 1 woman, arms spread on gurneys like Jesus was stretched on the cross made of wood. And I want to say, may the perpetrators of these executions someday find forgiveness within themselves for these murders they've ordered and carried out. I want to say it with as much love, genuine love and compassion, as I've been taught Jesus extended to his executioners. And even though many of those executed here at Terre Haute had committed horrible crimes, I think that the Jesus of my Sunday school upbringing, the Jesus that preached, do unto others as you would have them do unto you, would have spoken love to those miscreants, just like it's purported that he did to Barabbas. Go and sin no more. Ah, a second chance. My friend Philip, with more than 20 years in prison cells, says we all need at least 1,000 chances, not just a second chance, to get it right, to figure it out, to become fully human to one another. Some folks have many more challenges to climb out from under than others, so much more anger to work through, so much more self-hatred to lay aside, layer after layer, or perhaps mental illness and or addictions that need daily attention, first chance, second chance, third chance, that it takes us, them, a lifetime sometimes to get it right. Father, Mother, Universe, forgive them, for they know not what they do. Go and sin no more. Find that inherent goodness, that spark of the sacred that is at the core of who we are as you use, and sin no more. Do not intentionally harm others or yourselves. Tend to that spark. Keep it burning. Reveal it to the world you inhabit. Second chance, third chance, fourth. I wonder if Jesus saw the irony in the fact that he, a babe born to such humble beginnings, a teacher who spoke of meekness and peacemaking and caring for the sick, the homeless, the imprisoned, I wonder if he knew that he would scare the bejesus out of men who lived in palaces and had thousands of soldiers at their beck and call. Whew, his popularity and the truth of what he expounded must have caught them off guard before they'd had their morning coffee. Maybe they'd had a bad night's sleep. Forgive them, for they know not what they do. Second chance, Jubilee. It's really difficult for me sometimes to say, Father, Mother, Self, forgive them, for they know not what they do, because it seems to me that the executioners, the Trumps, the Putins, and all those who keep their boots firmly planted on the necks of people of color, the necks of the oppressed, the necks of the poor, have to know what they are doing. But I do believe that Jesus of New Testament teachings would encourage me to forgive, to somehow make the circle big enough for those whose actions seem unforgivable. I have no doubt that if Brian Doyle were still alive, he'd disagree with some of my theological ideas about Jesus and his totally flesh and blood humanity, no more divine than the rest of us, but perhaps more in touch with the power of love, compassion, and forgiveness than most of us, more in touch with that divine spark that each of us carries. So if I could, I would ask Mr. Doyle's forgiveness for taking his words, if he was truly us, further than he'd like. And I thank him for opening this window in my heart and mind that caused me to consider Jesus in ways that I probably wouldn't have if I hadn't read the poem. I definitely see the spark of the divine in Brian Doyle, having read several of his books of poems and essays, and I have a feeling he'd see the spark in me as well. Even when Doyle is expressing religion in a way that I don't agree with, he says it with such beauty and tenderness, and usually about real-life people, that I have no problem accepting him as a fellow searcher of truth, as someone who tried his best to discover what it means to be a human being. As did Jesus, I think. May we all have the courage to follow our true paths and miss the sad news, the really hard news we hear, watch, read about, and carry around with us every day. May we allow time, plenty of time, for falling down laughter, for giggling uncontrollably, and for joy too heavy to put into words. Closing hymn, page 276, O Young and Fearless Prophet. psalm. Closing words, number 692. And let's read this together. If here you have found freedom, take it with you into the world. If you have found comfort, go and share with others. If you have dreamed dreams, help one another that they may come true. If you have known love, give some back to a bruised and hurting world. Go in peace. And that's by Laura Lynn Bellamy. And the congregational benediction.
May the blessings of love rest upon you. May peace abide with you. May God's presence illuminate your heart now and forevermore.
Go in peace. Know that you are loved and that your life is sacred.